Alrighty. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Doom Post podcast, the first episode. My name is DC, or you may know me as Guoba, and I'm the chosen host. Surprise. Well, really no surprises there. Please find someone else. No, I'm kidding. I'll do it for you guys. TC really is the bomb. So, I would have been proud to introduce Azel, but unfortunately he's decided to take a bit of a vacation. By that I mean he's vacated this podcast. He's sleeping.
Oh,
I think.
God. Yeah,
Yeah.
I guess.
So we decided that we will move on, but with a little bit of help. But first, let me introduce one of the main men of the hour. Please welcome from our very own team, KB.
Hello, guys. Right now, I am the current one of the TC leads at WFP, so I oversee some of the theory crafting stuff and some of our guide work and just like general management of anything TC related in our server. Yeah, and right now we have Monochrome to join us right now in this podcast. You want to introduce yourself, Mono?
Yeah, I'm a senior TCer at KQM. I've been around since the very beginning of the KQM TCL, so I very much a veteran. I'm mostly a playtester and more hands-on kind of guy rather than a calc monkey, so to say. So I'm more of a practical person.
Mhm. And don't worry, guys. We're not going to be getting into like too many crazy calcs. If you're just interested in just hearing about like more higher level stuff about the game rather than the nitty gritty, since all that you can probably read if you're really interested in it.
Yeah, I mean, listen, guys, they got the guy, that believes in waifu over meta to host this. So, like, my brain will fry, like, if you guys start going into, like, the fifth derivatives, calculating the jerk. Oh, my goodness.
No. No. I'm definitely not talking about that. That's for sure.
I know you guys have done it before. But,
Well, nowadays I
Yeah.
do less calcs on the daily, but yeah. Royal
so-
weapon calculations.
royal weapon calculations.
Oh my god.
Dare I ask what this means? Or is it like a real pain
Someone
to
in the
explain
chat
that
just
as well?
mentioned it. It's the royal weapons have like dynamic changing crit rate, and to
What?
calc them, you have to use a lot of specific like fundamentals about math, like Markov chains and whatnot. But we're not going to get
It's
into that
not
right now. I know you guys want to hear about the new characters that are coming out, right? We have 3 new characters, which is like really exciting. We usually don't get 3 at a time per patch, but here we are.
Yeah, launch of a region, we just get a packed patch.
Yeah, right. So
Oh,
first
man.
off, which one do you guys want to start with?
We already talked about Nilo
Hmm.
before the stream, but we can just say it again if we want.
Yeah, okay, cool.
Recap
So
time.
yeah, Nilo is a very interesting character. She's one of the first characters that requires like very specific elements on her team, or else her like abilities just don't function. So what I mean by that is if you're not running Dendro and Hydro only, your passive turns off. And one of her passive is currently like one of the most important parts about her kits. It basically makes your bloom damage on your team much more enhanced, like larger radius and more damage in general.
So, who would you run with Nilo? Like,
So-
who would be the ideal team?
Okay, so at the moment, we don't have that many options for her in team comps because, as I said, you only can use Dendro and Hydro, and you must have a healer unit because her bloom damage that she does will also damage her own allies just by the nature of the reaction. And since her bloom damage is significantly enhanced, you will be taking quite a substantial amount of self damage, which would require a healer. It's like nothing too dire. If you have a healer, you're going to be fine. So at the moment, one of the strong strongest like candidates for a Nilo team is Kokomi, since she heals so well and she applies a good amount of Hydro off field and on field if you want to tweak like who's the one owning the blooms on the team. And that's something we're going to be getting into later, that like you can build teams around bloom ownership, which means like the character that you want to activate the blooms, you're going to be stacking EM on her or on them, and Nilo is going to be offering a buff basically to her whole team by stacking HP.
Yeah, so that reaction bonus can be sort of translated into extra EM, since flat reaction bonus is a lot more effective as you go higher, whereas EM decreases in value as you go higher in reaction bonus. It has actual diminishing returns, so it can be quite significant in the right situation.
Awesome. I think we got a question from chat here. Hexuchi asks, I want to know what Nilo's role or Nilo's role actually is, since I keep seeing different answers. So what do you guys think? What is her role?
Her role really is just to make blooms on a team stronger globally. That doesn't necessarily mean that she's going to be the one activating the blooms at all times, but when you stack health on her, all bloom damage on your whole team throughout all the 4 characters you have is just increased. So generally, you don't have to worry about EM with her much, since you can just have a different unit trigger the blooms. Although she can proc blooms on her own, it's just you probably don't need to worry about having her be the one activating the blooms, just because she's going to be stacking HP for the bloom bonus damage.
Okay, anything to add to that, Mono?
Yeah, I think, like, intuitively, I would think that having her not be the trigger would be more ideal, because then you can just stack HP or ER. I'm not sure what her ER needs would be, since I have not playtested her at all. So it depends, but you would probably have a lot better composition overall if you could just stack HP on her and only HP, and then EM on someone else. I am not confident in that. I am not sure who would be who.
Okay, I can get a bit into like the whole HP and ER thing.
Yeah.
At the moment, from what we can tell, it seems like her bursts, it doesn't do enough damage with the HP build to warrant wanting to like have enough ER to cast every rotation. So, you know, that would be quite similar to like how Yoimiya is traditionally played, or Yai sometimes, where you just skip on building a lot of ER and you just burst every other rotation, because the ratio on her burst is overall like decent, but the thing is you won't be stacking crit on her, since you need to have a lot of HP.
Yeah, that's cool. I want to see more of this leveraging where you don't necessarily need to burst every rotation. I kind of like this design because there's more modality here, and sometimes he does want to burst every rotation. That's cool.
Yeah, it's really neat. Let me see. Someone asked something about her weapons, and that's something we can talk about because
Oh
yeah. So right now, her weapon choices, there's not too many HP swords at the moment, and the only one right now that I can think of that's like significant is obviously the new weapon coming out, her signature weapon, which is an HP sword that gives your team EM based on your HP, which is fantastic, right? It does everything you want.
It's pretty
but if you don't have that sword, you do have like some other options, but they're not going to be heavily impactful as for like you know how when other characters, it's pretty important to have generally a good weapon on them, whereas in Nilo it doesn't really change too much, because most of your options are either going to be ER Sword, which lets her burst more often, which is, although it's nice, the amount of gain you will get from being able to burst more often with Nilo is not that significant for her team damage. You want to kind of treat her more like a support to facilitate blooms, is how I usually conceptualize it. There is one neat interaction. Sacrificial Sword will allow you to have both parts of her E if you just choose to get the Water Ring and the Hydro Infusions sword effect. So that's something that's neat.
Awesome. I think we had a question as well about if how her team restrictions would be affected, once there are more Dendro characters being introduced.
Yeah, her teams should be much easier to build once we have more Dendron units, especially a Dendro healer in particular. That's one of the main things that a lot of her options are lacking, because at the moment you either run Barbara and Kokomi, and although Kokomi is extremely good, she's a 5-star unit, so not everyone's going to have her, and Barbara is a bit more awkward for different reasons, and overall not like an outstanding unit to have on an Elo team. But I mean, if you don't have Kokomi, you're at the moment forced to have Barbara as a healer.
So we got a question about her bloom, a very specific question. Can I ask it? So can I ask again? Nilo's bloom should self-damage for like 1,000 damage per second. Is there anyone with enough HP to on-field other than Nilo herself?
I mean, Kokomi and like a lot of units can on-field and tank the bloom damage as long as you have a team healer. A lot of the healers in the game generally heal enough to sustain the amount of self-bloom damage. So it shouldn't be too bad. It's just you just need the healer. You can't like run a pseudo healer like how in some teams people would run weapons that would heal, like Prototype Amber, or using Xingqiu's rain swords to heal themselves. Those are like minor amounts of healing, which usually isn't sufficient enough to counteract bloom damage.
Incidental healing is not sufficient, so.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a team or a comp that you guys are very excited or very keen on testing out with Nilo, or the one that you'd try first?
Right now, there's not too many to look at. There's the double Dendro teams, which involve Cole and Dendro main character, which is like sufficient. We're playing around with some of the things in the rotation. There are ideas of basically starting your rotation with Nilo and then switching to all the other characters, and then that way Nilo doesn't own any of the blooms, and you can have the Dendro or Hydro units on the bloom reactions.
Okay, what about you, Mono?
I've seen some kicking around of more double Hydro cores. Double Hydro is pretty fucking good core already, so why not use it on Nilo? Or who knows, maybe even triple?
Yeah.
Those are more intriguing to me than the double Dendro cores, although I'm not sure what it will do to ownership yet.
Yeah, that part is the tricky thing, because Nilo has, she's pretty unique in the fact that she can control how much application she has compared to like other characters, because she has a branching option between which version of her skill she uses. There's one which makes the Water Ring that applies Hydro every 2 seconds. And then there's the sword mode, which lets you just have or Hydro Infusion on her normal attacks, which she can opt to not use, right, if she wants to lessen the amount of Hydro application.
All right, so we got another question from chat. Going back to weapons, is there any early calc of how much damage difference would there be between her signature weapon and bursting every other time versus an energy recharge weapon and bursting off cooldown?
There should be some calcs right now on our master sheet, although I don't know like the exact answer to that off the top of my head, because I haven't been like working super closely with her. But it is also going to be dependent on basically who's owning the blooms in our teams. That's the tricky part. If you're assuming Nilo just having 0 bloom ownership, her signature weapon, the EM share is nice for her allies, but she does get quite a bit of EM for herself too with the weapon.
Goodness me. Lots of good stuff here. So I saw that there were other questions about the characters, particularly Cyno at this point. So do you want to go ahead and kind of like just cover Cyno real quick so we can kind of get that in the pool?
Yeah, sure.
Even more constrained by the Dendros right now than Nilo is.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well,
why is that?
It depends. There's a couple of schools of thoughts on Cyno right now, so I'd like to hear what Mono thinks.
Well, we got nothing but time.
Well, from what I've seen, like, people have tried a bunch of different things, and you look at his design and you think, okay, this guy is very clearly supposed to be catalyze, aggravate, on field with 4TF. We're done here, right? Well, no. Like, people have played around with him and done a bunch of other comps, and even though he has more explicit synergy with that kind of playstyle, it's mostly just pretty similar to all of the other cores we have going around, like National or more similar to Zhao teams. He can do a lot of things, but last I checked, I haven't seen anything that's particularly outstanding. Like, nothing that jumps out. Although, I don't know if you've been following him closely, KP. Is there, like, a new comp that is ahead of the pack? I don't know.
Right now, what I'm somewhat seeing is the current Dendro options we have aren't like particularly strong units, right?
Yeah.
And the design for Cyno really does tend to lean towards like aggravate or reaction stuff, since you know he can build EM without being punished in personal damage. But what I am also seeing is like people just slapping on traditional characters onto Cyno, like non-Dendro characters, and his performance basically kind of ends up the same as aggravate teams or slightly stronger in some cases. But that's also by factor of the other units being strong in their own rights. So cores that involve Beto and Bennett, for example, will do pretty good damage just overall. I mean, as long as you satisfy Beto's energy constraints, she does quite a good bit of damage with Bennett's snapshot. And you can see that happen if you play those two characters with Cyno, because he does generate a decent amount of energy if you run 4 TF, which allows him to cast his spells more often to generate energy.
I'm not too thrilled about the idea of using Benny with him, because he seems almost uncontrollably mobile, so...
That is true. He does have a very aggressive lock-on for his skill. But for enemies that are more stationary, like rune guards, stuff like that, you can kind of keep them like in this circle. Of course, if you play aggravate teams, you really don't have any restrictions on mobility, since as long as you get one tick of Dendro in, you're basically fine, right? And I think that's going to be like the more comfortable team to play in Overworld or mobbing in general, is you don't have to worry about circles like as in Benny teams. Although I will say snapshotting Benny with Beto does provide such a significant amount of damage that you probably aren't going to be losing too much by having him slip out of Bennett's buff circle every now and then. I don't think it'd be that... I wouldn't imagine it to be that big of a deal.
Okay. I know like Beto's benefit from Benny.
Yeah.
I'm not sure about the others. We'll see, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully it's not too bad in practice.
Yeah,
Shout out to
overall,
Mold
he's-
for the background, by the way. Just sorry to interrupt. It's
Oh, yeah.
it's a thing of beauty. Like, there are so many hidden things in this
Yeah.
in this background. So, like, if you happen to come across a topic that you're not particularly interested in, have fun, because like this is Where's Waldo Genshin edition. All right, continue.
Yeah.
Oh no.
No, now I'm looking at the background to find things. But yeah, Sino right now, he's I'm not as thrilled about him as like a personal thing, just because he's like a very long on-field character, and that isn't as like, that's not to my preference, right? As a player, right? Maybe it is for a lot of people, like people who like playing Zhao or Razor, who like having a character be souped up and staying on the field for a decent amount of time. If you're like that kind of person, you probably like Sino. A lot of his rotations, they can be on the longer side. You can opt to cut them shorter if you want to maintain like specific buffs or energy economy for your team. That's always an option to do, like cut your rotation on Sino a little bit shorter.
I'm personally interested in Candace's ability to overwrite Benny C6's Pyro Infusion. Yes.
Yeah,
That's
that's neat.
it. So if you don't know, weapon gauges are a thing. So if it says that the infusion is overwritable, it operates by applying a gauge directly to your weapon. So Benny C6 applies a pyro gauge to all applicable weapons. And because of how Benny Field works, he ticks once every second, and weapon gauges so far are all 1U, and Candace ticks every half a second. She will just absolutely smoke any attempt at Benny overwriting it. At least on paper. I have not experimented with it, but I'll measure the exact specifics of her infusion. It's possible it could be like Diluc, where he only applies pyro to his weapon when it's not pyro, in which case there would be brief moments where it would fall off if you try to introduce a competing gauge, but I have not seen any case of a infused with Candace character do normals randomly, so I don't think that's what's happening.
I do recall seeing like a certain interaction where if you have 3 competing weapon gauges, sometimes you'll have it like switch around just because of the way the tick rates overlay each other.
Yeah, that's definitely possible.
But usually if it's just her infusion plus another, it's pretty stable in which one ends up being the overwhelmingly active one.
Oh, speaking of, from what I've seen, overlapping 2 gauges, weapon gauges on each other doesn't seem to do anything special with the current ones that we have. And by that, I mean Electrocharge and Frozen Weapon. So there was a theory kicking around that since weapon infusions do specific damage by checking the gauge on your weapon, like what would happen if there were 2? Like, would you do both damage? Well, so far the answer is no, but more disappointingly, unlike Pyro and Electro, you get overloads. You can damage other enemies with that interaction with Benny C6 and recasting Keqing's E. That doesn't seem to be the case with an electro-charged weapon. Like, in theory, if you had an electro-charged weapon and you had enemies that were wet around you, you would zap them with the chain lightning and it would be pretty stable. That would be nice. It would be reliable reaction damage, but I haven't seen any case where it works for some bizarre reason, and I cannot explain it.
Okay, I think we got some questions, a lot of questions about
Yeah.
Candace as well. I think particularly it looks like her about with her weapon as well. What's the best Candace build and 5-star weapon?
Oh boy. So to talk about her build path, I guess I have to explain like what her role is, or how she interacts with her team. At the moment, it seems like Candace's motion values and base HP, which she scales off of for her damage, is quite on the lower side of things. And what that can indicate is usually if a character does low personal damage, is that weapons like Favonius become much better because they help your team out, and you don't lose as much for not, gassing up her damage significantly. So that would be the first recommendation, is a Favonius weapon for her. If you're interested in doing like big damage with her shield bash, obviously I think Homa might be one of the better options, since it's a high crit damage spear with an HP passive which she scales off of. That's like perfectly fine. It's just I don't think you would be getting as much of a value on slapping like really high valuable damage weapons on her, rather than just using like little Favonius weapons. And also I guess we can also discuss like what does like Candace do. So right now it seems like a lot of her like value that MiHoYo is putting on her is from the Hydro Infusion that she can give to allies to basically compensate for the fact that she does low damage. The only issue with that right now is the game in its current state. There aren't too many characters that would love a Hydro Infusion that can't already access one. The most like intuitive example would be like Xingqiu. Having a Hydro Infusion would mean he could stay on field, even using like buffs like Bennett on field to do strong normal attacks and strong rain swords, because they'll both be Hydro and they'll scale with his extremely high Hydro percent. There's also other like characters that can use the Hydro Infusion, although I would consider him more on like the funny side of builds rather than like optimal, right? Like you have funny things like Hydro Kaching, like someone said in the chat, Hydro Beto, which is really fun too. But you generally want your infusion to match the element of the character using it. So there is one other unique like idea that I've thought about, and some people have talked about also probably, is potentially Hydro infusing Kazuha, and you would gain a lot from just running. Either you can do Bloom Kazuha, which is really funny. He already stacks high amounts of EM, and you could proc Bloom with his normal attacks or whatnot.
Yeah, I've been struggling to come up with a way to use Candace, because other than what you've described, because there's no backdoor with weapon gauges yet. Any other more traditional use of her just runs into she's either not applicable at all, or she's competing with very, very powerful Hydro units just in general. So it's kind of tough. Like, something that would excite me would be like overwritable Dendro infuse, and then the reaction actually works and she can pull Dendro cores out of nowhere.
That would be very neat.
Yes. But we don't have that yet. So if she does get that, then she's gaming. But right now she's also extremely limited, particularly by Dendro characters, because I feel like she's supposed to be used with Dendro, with her just close range AoE being very conducive to triggering a lot of cores reliably, but not there. It could
Yeah.
be that she has good reaction count if someone were to map it out. Just
It's a little awkward.
Yeah, the obvious
Uh,
damage is not very high.
mhm. One thing to mention is her C6 is something that's pretty important for her to apply more Hydro. So normally without C6, you can only apply Hydro like a couple times with her burst by swapping in and out. You'll get an AoE application of Hydro, but to get very, like, I wouldn't say consistent because it's only every 2.3 seconds, which means you probably are proccing it like every 2.5 or 3 seconds because of the way buffering normal attacks works with it. If you are looking to do bloom stuff, it might be required for her to use C6, which is not ideal. It's a pretty big mechanic having like off-field Hydro, and it's locked behind her constellation. Someone asked how can freeze work with Candace? She can maintain freeze decently. With Ayaka, it's just there isn't a huge amount of appeal to run her over an option that's very much well suited for freeze like Mona or Kokomi, because those characters kind of have a lot of nice things that assist freeze teams. Like, for example, they can run Thrilling Tales of Dragon Slayer to buff the cryo unit that's using the freeze. Generally, their application is pretty stable and good AoE. Mona has her Omen buff, which makes her units do more damage, and Kokomi has healing, whereas Candace doesn't really have significant buffs. I know she does have a buff for normal attacks. However, it is not really comparable to a lot of the other stronger buffs in the game. Like if you're building full HP on a Candace, on a reasonable build to make sure you still are able to burst, you're probably getting like just 15 to 20% normal attack damage, which is not as valuable as, something like global damage percent that Kazuha gives, for example. Of course, that character is very strong, but just keep in mind that her damage boost is lower than most characters, and it's also more niche because not a lot of teams depend solely on normal attack damage for the damage composition of the team.
I want this podcast to shill. Oh, sorry, go for it.
I was just reading the next question. Would her infusion override Aya's alt dash infusion? So from what I've seen so far, a frozen weapon, which is what it would be, just operates identically to a cryo weapon. So I have to see if there's like overlapping hydro or whatever. I have to do experiments on that when it goes live, but it should work as you want it. Last I checked.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
So yeah, I'm just gravitating towards that Raiden comment. I want this podcast to shill. What was it? Totem, Elemental Mastery, Raiden more. Thanks. You see, the thing is, I love Raiden. I love her so much. So you gotta explain this to me. What is that? What does this mean? If I can make her, if I can make her powerful,
Okay.
If this is some crack theory, I'm in for it, man. Experimental treatment. Let's go.
So
it's actually a pretty neat build. Running Tenacity of the Millilith on Raiden means that you're buffing your team consistently because her skill just activates off field so often, right? So you have good uptime on that. And then there are now some team comps that people are playing around with stacking EM on Raiden and never like switching to her, essentially. She's like a very consistent Fischl, for example, except the main difference is Raiden's skill hits in an AoE, so it's pretty good at proccing Dendro cores to get hyper blooms, from what I understand.
Even before that, it was experimented with in like the Sim Discord. It's surprisingly fine if you somehow haven't invested enough tenacity, but it really gets people worked up when they see it so high up on the list. It's really funny.
Yeah, it's a funny build. I like it. And tangent, on a different tangent, Tenacity of the Millilith on Raiden's actually perfectly fine for certain builds, specifically involving like Eula teams. There are some Eula teams where it is actually better to run Tenacity of the Millilith instead of Emblem. Assuming your Raiden is C0, right? And once you C2, her personal damage jumps up enough to where you just run Emblem regardless. But the neat thing about that is you can basically farm for a Eula Raiden team with just one domain, which is really good for your resin if you're just really interested in that kind of team type. You're not really wasting the tenacity pieces.
Yeah, that's
okay.
always
I'm gonna have to look into this.
Very funny build.
So, yeah, I'm just in this for my person. It has nothing to do with the 3 new characters. This is for my own self-interest and gain.
Yeah.
Of course.
So I'll let these guys go for it. Let's see. Let's see what we got here. All the questions disappeared to the top. Let's see. How long would the frozen weapon ore last? Frozen weapon duration. I think this was referring to Candace.
Yeah, the what I was talking about, Vespertine knows about the weapon gauge thing. I assume it would just follow the formula, but the thing is, I'm not sure if the decay would be weird because weapon gauges don't have their decay match their strength. They just have an arbitrary duration, so it's difficult to predict. I imagine that's going to be a massive headache for absolutely no gain, but I'm going to do it.
Yeah, Mono here is really into doing that kind of testing stuff, so
yeah.
I basically just wait to see the entry in the KQM library about it.
Oh yeah. Well, it's probably going to be a ticket for a long time, if I'll be honest, but it'll be there.
What is the process like, by the way? I don't know if this has been like kind of properly explained, or if if anyone is it like a clear-cut schedule? Like, do you actually lay out what you're going to test exactly, or is it kind of like a what happens if I do this sort of thing?
Oh, for that thing, it's just so like basic mechanics is like when a character releases, there's a basic mechanics ticket that describes how like the lowest level operation of all of her traits and abilities and skills and burst work. And that's all consolidated into a single ticket. And most of the information that would go in there that can't be generalized across the entire cast would just be in the basic mechanics ticket. Patch ends, it gets put on the site, and that's that. But if they have something new, like say a weapon gauge for Candace, and I needed to add to the current weapon gauge page how hydro gauges work in particular, since we didn't have one that was overwritable before, I would just make a new channel on the KQM Theory Crafting Discord, and I would investigate in that channel how exactly it operates, and then I would have a finding, evidence, significance, and then I would have my other fellow editors review it. And if it was checked out and corresponds to the evidence that I posted, it would go on the website. That's the process. There isn't really a deadline or any schedule or anything. That's just off the cuff, your own interest, and then as long as you keep working on it and stay active, your ticket won't get deleted. So
this would be a perfect spot to plug something in, wouldn't it? So how can people get involved if they want to?
Join the KQM Discord and check out the Theory Crafting channels. And if you want to make a ticket, be warned that it's a lot of channels. You can't get the library submissions rule in the README. Have fun.
Yeah, I know There was a time where I was granted view permissions for every channel in KQM, and my Discord client like crashed. It was really funny.
Yeah,
It's quite a lot. But yeah, there's a lot of cool projects. So likely your favorite character probably has something going on if you want to contribute to, like, you know, just the knowledge base of specific things your characters can do. It's really neat.
Oh yeah, we've joked about this, but like lately we've realized it's somewhat similar to a scientific journal, and then the scientists or the professors that are in our staff have just realized that the views they get for their guides, which is more or less the same amount of effort for a research paper, gets more views and money and hits just in general than their serious stuff. It is just like, oh my god.
Yeah.
So essentially, like, this is this could have been research that they've been doing for years and years, you know, making a real contribution to the world. And what gets, you know, makes them the dosh and gets the most views, the statistics about a fictional game. That's that must be that must be infuriating. I would be pissed. I'm just like, yeah, I spent my whole life researching this, but nobody cares. But hey, I wrote a guide on Dendro, and that bought me this house.
Yeah, the tone that I see people say when they realize that is just kind of almost defeated. It's interesting.
You know what the ironic thing about this is? It shows people don't care more about fantasy than reality. That's the way I see it.
Well, it helps that Genshin has such a huge audience. It's like insane how big this game is across like multiple countries and communities. It's a pretty accessible game at the end of the day.
The globalism is a big deal. Like, any individual scientific journal would be very much largely restricted to what universities had access to them, and even then there would be a very large language barrier because KQM guides are mostly written in prose, whereas scientific journals are usually extremely technical. So it's a lot more accessible in both senses of the word.
And that's something that, like, overall KQM has been trying to basically improve on, is making sure that the guide can be correct and have a lot of good information, but you want to make it like very readable and approachable if you're just someone who wants to learn like how a character works. So, you know, we went through various stages of KQM like guide stuff. Like, for example, Azel used to like write 80-page guides that are very informative, but like might not exactly cater to someone who just wants to pick up a character really quickly, right? But I mean, some characters are more complicated than others, so the guide lengths can vary depending on that.
Yeah. A lot of the review processes, trimming the fat or reducing jargon, so...
Oh yeah, most definitely.
Emmy is a big stickler for keeping it simple, stupid, so... She'll be on the podcast at some point, and I'm sure she's going to really go over that in greater detail.
Oh Lord, I do owe her a podcast. Actually, that's that's another story and a half later. But yes, that will be. It's going to be an interesting podcast. Yeah.
Oh no! Can't wait to see it.
But yeah. Also, at this point, we should probably shout out WFP's TC team as well.
Yeah,
because I would feel super bad if we just continued. If we continued about KQM, we're like, wait, whose platform we're using?
Oh yeah.
And then, you know, my ass gets on the frying pan. And
oh my god.
All right, time to shill our server.
So listen,
yeah.
If you want to know where the party is, you know, WFP. The P stands for party. Wangsheng Funeral Party.
Yeah.
Our TC team's pretty good too. We may not be, you know, the crunching math nerds We're a bunch of cool nerds.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Yeah, the TC team at WFP is great. I love it. I mean, I did select everyone, so but I think it's a good team, and we generally try to get work done for most of the new characters to come out, like the pre-TC groundwork for them. Although sometimes, you know, there won't be enough like people with interest on a certain character, so that will explain like why we don't have like a Dory, like guide or information on her, like much information on her. It's just, yeah. But if people are looking to get into pre-TC, you know, we still have applications that we send out every now and then that you can just apply, and we can select you for the team and help train you up for TCing. Be nice.
Since you've both said your piece, I can now say this. You know, you can just apply for one, and then if the other doesn't accept you, just go that one. You know, who knows?
Right. Also, when you're in WFP, you do have access to the KQM store, which is. Are we allowed to talk about that, Mono, or is that?
Wait.
Whoops.
You just dropped it.
LTTstore.com.
Oh dear.
LTTstore.com.
Leaked. Okay, don't worry about the store.
A leak stream leaked something too soon.
Yeah, right. You guys can figure that out on your own. But
Hey,
yeah,
what do you know? We're WFP to the end.
There are benefits to joining the TC team. We generally try to, like, you know, make sure everyone's happy and, you know, accommodate for things.
You know, I have a question about KQM, and this is very, very much piqued my interest. Can you tell me what the Guoba project is?
Oh, we can show the Guoba project.
Oh boy.
By the way, this wasn't an intended, like, sort of shilling. I just looked at it and I was like, oh, very nice.
Oh,
because
Azel
you can
just
see
woke
my
up.
name. Oh, Azel just woke up. Well, tell him to sit down and get on here so he can answer all your questions.
Okay, maybe tag myself out.
Oh, look at that. That's a shiny new website. So what is the Guoba? Well, first of all, what is the Guoba project? Why don't we start there?
Okay, so it's a project that started in KQM, which the main goal is to gather everyone's artifact data, like your inventory. Imagine like, you know, like your personal accounts, like whole inventory of artifacts. And then we use that data to like figure out like what to recommend in guides for certain things based on like people's artifacts, because sometimes even though like a build is ideal, the statistics for getting certain pieces, it's really like hairy to calculate, right? Like it's very mathematically intense. So this is a brute force way of doing it, is just gathering everyone's artifact data, and it shows a good display, and it also kind of helps us figure out where certain communities are in terms of progression, which can just be fun in general. It doesn't always have to be like, you know, for a meaningful project, but like it is very neat. For example, this is a graph showing everyone's Kazuha builds. So it assumes it's looking at only 4 Viridescent Veneer pieces and graphing them out to how much ER you would have in relation to your EM. And as you can see, you know, when you get to 180 ER, most people in certain communities can expect around 800 EM. Just as the 50th percentile, and then there's some outliers. And the neat thing you get when you contribute to this project is your name gets to end up on the leaderboard. So that's really cool for people who want to just maximum artifacts or just see how they compare to other players at the moment.
They say submissions are currently closed. Is that true?
Yes. So we open them up in waves sometimes because our developers they need to like do adjustments and whatnot. And this does take quite a bit of time to process some of the data because it's legitimately running a like under the hood version of the Genshin optimizer on everyone's accounts. So it will optimize your builds for you. So when you're submitting your artifact data, you don't have to equip them to a specific character for the Guoba project to know what your best build is. It will figure it out on its own. So basically we have some people that have like Giga Chad computers that process all this data every now and then in batches. So right now it's closed, but we do plan on opening it again like very soon, like maybe within a week. I have to check on that later. But so for more like concrete example of something I'm working with, for example, I've written the Yelan guide with some people, and one of the things we found in her TC is she can get away with running an HP circlet, since the way her stat distribution and needs are distributed. But the thing is, right now, crit circulates are more rare to get than HP and drop rate, but you also have the option of getting crit damage or crit rate, which can influence it. So we just decided, let's just graph everyone's best Yelan build, depending if you use a crit circlet or if you use an HP circlet, and see the difference. And as you can see, even though in calcs and using standardization, HP circlet should only be 3% lower, it seems like the trend is most people don't really keep their HP circlets that often. So it turns out that there's a bigger skew towards crit for Yelan players. Like you can see that they're doing about 5k more DPS on average at the start of the graph. But also, you know, again, back to the leaderboard thing, people can see where they stand in DPS.
Yeah, I think a lot
players.
of people are interested in actually figuring, like, because we're getting questions like, how do we submit our data? Like, is there like, can you just like walk us through that? Like how when it opens again in the waves, like how they can sort of contribute?
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. There should be a button here that like you click to basically start the process to upload your data, and they'll have step-by-step instructions. Basically, if you're already using the Genshin optimizer, or if you ran a scanner through your account, you should have like a database file that has all your artifacts, and you import it into the Guoba project. And then the only other step is to verify your artifacts by equipping your best ones, which they determine through an algorithm, your best artifacts onto your character and showcasing it through your profile. And then the Guoba project will scan for those artifacts to prevent anyone from cheating or like inputting custom data. So once you verify your artifacts, it basically gets put in within a matter of like a few hours, depending on how often we've been running the processing on it.
And once we reach 500 views and 25k subscribers, we will open the first wave right now. I can't speak on behalf of that. I make no promises.
I'll definitely make another announcement when we open up a second wave. It seems like we've got quite a bit of people to contribute this time around. And another neat thing is you can do an affiliation tag to represent your community. So, you know, you see a bunch of people like streamer communities like Jay Stern or Sajef, and you see like KQM people and WFP people here too. So it's really nice to just like, it's a fun thing to do more so than anything. So
it's a competition.
Yeah, so basically we bait you guys with the fun idea of a leaderboard so we can get data to make better guides.
Come on,
I think
WFP.
It's a pretty beneficial exchange for everyone involved.
Yeah, do better. We want your data.
Someone asked, will this make KQM standard on EM piece change to a more realistic standard? So EM in the KQM standard has been something that we've been discussing internally for quite a long time. And I don't know the exact state of it right now, but there already had been talks about it being too lenient for certain builds.
I can explain more. So what basically has happened, we've like all come to a consensus that it is too lenient, yes, but we haven't exactly figured out how to fairly penalize going triple EM over other combinations of stats, and how to increment it. Like, do we do it for 2 or 1 EM main stat? Like, that's something that still needs to be figured out, but it definitely does need to change.
There's some ideas being kicked around with how to penalize EM main stats. So for Circlet and Goblet, EM main stat is actually extremely rare. And what we could do is penalize how many liquid substats you get to choose from, because that reflects kind of like you know, everyone I think has been through the situation where they're trying to farm for their Kazuha or Venti and they want an EM circlet and they'll just take whatever because like you don't get many to in terms of drop rate, so you just pick whatever works the best, which generally is a weaker piece than if you're aiming for something like crit rate, crit damage.
Yeah, like most people just get an EM piece. They're not even good. They just level it up and they just take it and dip the fuck out because they need to roll 100 more artifacts to get another one.
Yeah. I can pull up the Kazuha one. Apologies to sound-only listeners, but I'll pull up some visuals for the Kazuha one right now. So these blue lines right now are percentile lines. So this one in particular is the 50th, so this is the average. I can remove the others real quick. See where
you are
stands.
listening. The website address is guoba.kachingmains.com.
Make sure it's framed right. So this purple line right now is what we have as the Kaching main standard, and as you can see, the 50th percentile can hit it in certain regards, but it's much more comfortable for like higher invested players to hit it like the 25th percentile, which keep in mind the people that upload their artifact data to this project are going to be skewed to be more serious like Genshin players. Like I don't think a more like relaxed or casual player would be uploading their artifact data to a site for like a leaderboard. So this is probably more reflective of the higher end community. So just keep that in mind that the average person is probably lower than this. But yeah, like it's rough right now to farm EM and ER for Kazuha. But yeah, that's something we're gonna be discussing internally and we'll update people. People will know once if we change the standards. Just pull Xiphos. I guess we can talk about Xiphos because it's a pretty cool weapon that's coming out.
Before we get to that, I gotta ask, why Guoba project? Why Guoba? Why the name Guoba? Does it stand for something?
Yeah, it does stand for something. Let me see the exact name. They don't have it on the main screen. They should, but it does stand for something. I just forgot what exactly.
It has to do with the file type also. Like it's a good file, right?
Mm-hmm.
I forget.
Yeah, good stands for something else.
Yeah. Acronyms within acronyms.
Yeah.
I just gotta say, you couldn't have chosen a better mascot.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Boba's like by far my favorite Genshin mascot. It's like he's great.
Hell yeah.
No one even.
Sorry,
comes
to the
close.
question.
Oh yeah.
To the question about Xiphos.
Yeah, Xiphos. That's a new new weapon. I mean, that's coming out next patch. It's really interesting because it's an EM sword. Like it has equivalent EM to Iron Sting that most Kazuha players do like running. But it also grants energy recharge based on your EM, which is really neat. And on top of that, it gives energy recharge to your allies. So it's a pretty nice sword. Although I will warn people that it's not like worth pulling for generally if you're not like a whaley kind of player. Just because it's a limited 4-star weapon, so you can only get it on certain banners. And of course, the chance of getting a specific 4-star weapon is extremely like low. It's very volatile. So
yeah.
I wouldn't ever personally recommend someone to pull for the weapon, even though it is pretty good for Kazuha, because usually you want to pull weapon banner for the 5-star weapons that you want, rather than thinking about the 4-star weapon. It's like a nice bonus, but it is quite a good weapon for Kazuha. It basically just does both worlds of Favonius and Iron Sting. Gives EM and ER. It is also kind of somewhat investment dependent, as in the ER you get really depends on how much how strong your Kazuha build is. So if you have a lot of EM on Kazuha, you'll get a good bit of ER.
I will say it's more potentially useful on not just Kazuha, just as another ER stick that just incidentally gives you EM, which I'm definitely interested in. But yeah, I agree with the sentiment that if you aren't either extremely established because you've played the game for like over a year or something, and you already have teams. So the only way you could really improve those teams is by pulling weapons. It doesn't really make sense to recommend a limited 4-star. So
Right, like I've done the gotcha math on it, like on my own a while ago. Pulling for 4-star limited weapons is like extremely difficult. Just for context, I'm a player that has quite a bit of like 5-star weapons, like about 20 or so, and it's very rare for me to have an R5 4-star weapon that's limited. The only time I get those is if I'm lucky that multiple banners have included that weapon in the past, and I happen to need or want those 5-star weapons. It's not something you really shoot for, because the other point is if you really have enough pulls to just R5 a limited 4-star weapon, you're probably better off just getting the normal 5-star weapon that is most likely very beneficial. In Kazuha's case, it would be the Freedom Sword, right?
Yeah, but I don't think that quite works for damage weapons. Absolutely yes, but I think Freedom Sworn in particular is a little bit less broad than Zyphos, so it doesn't quite work.
That's true. There's cases where Freedom Sworn wouldn't be giving you too much, whereas Zyphos would be just globally useful in ER.
Yeah, the idea though is still the same. Like hitting a specific gotcha item when there's like 5 other featured weapons is so tough, especially when
there's no pity
characters
or specific ways to guarantee that you get that one eventually.
No targeting, so you can get screwed. It's arguably even worse than hitting the 5 stars, like, because you have hard pities and omega hard pities on those.
Right. There's probably more updated gotcha math on the weapon like banner rates now, I think, because I remember doing the ticket for that a while back before they added the optimized path or whatever that's called to select your 5-star weapon. I'm pretty sure someone would have contributed to the 4-star weapon odds too, but if you look at it, you'll know for sure it's really rough. 100%. Also, another note about Zyphos is keep in mind the weapon has been changed since the first iteration. It's been nerfed a bit, so just make sure you keep up to date what the values are on release, because it could be weaker than the initial reveal of the weapon.
Was a bit crazy what it was tuned at initially.
Yeah, it was pretty absurd. It was just globally very good.
No, it's a little bit more questionable, but still interesting.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you for the sub.
Oh my goodness, thank you so much for the sub.
Thank you. Someone did ask, have we done calcs on Zyphos, R1 to R5 versus Freedom Sworn on Kazuha? I personally haven't looked at that closely, but I do expect it to be team dependent. Like, for example, Kazuha on a Hu Tao team, Hu Tao is going to be benefiting a lot from the party buff that Freedom Sworn provides, for example. Or like some characters will benefit from it more than others. So I think there will be variance, and the only way to know is to kind of calc it for yourself right now, because I don't think we have a big master sheet on all the comparisons between all the Kazuha teams using those 2 weapons yet.
Especially since Kazuha is an EM character, so you're going to run into a lot of swirl counting, which is extremely tedious. Although I'm not sure if Hazel already has counts for those. He might. So it might be expedited a bit in that regard.
Yeah. All right. I think we're getting close to the 1 hour mark, so this might be a decent time to end it or close up on things. You probably answer like a couple more questions and then call it a day. And
yeah, I am starving. I have not had any food all day.
Yeah, I saw that Azel woke up and he's begging for forgiveness for missing this podcast. I'll have to debate about that internally.
Okay. Well,
All right, then. Well, any more questions that you want to take a look at and answer before we kind of peace out? And by the way, shout out to Rinicorn for the gifted tier 1 sub. To Nat C99.
and thank you, Bambi, for the prime.
How's Cyno damage compared to Raiden? For that, the answer to that question, I would recommend people to wait for the character to be released, because he's kind of a combo, like an attack string oriented character, and it's a little bit harder to calc him. We do have tools over at WFE to like basically play the characters, and we do have insiders that can test for us, but you know, there's not like a solid answer. If you were to ask me what I would personally recommend to a friend if they wanted to pull for Raiden or Cyno, I think Raiden overall is a very strong character, and that would probably be what I would lean towards too, just because on top of damage, she does a lot with energy economy in her team. Cyno's a bit more limited right now, and it doesn't seem like his damage values are absurd yet, so
it is possible that he just doesn't have his correct shell, either because we haven't thought about it, or it just simply doesn't exist yet. So
yeah, I think that's something that applies to Nilo too, is like these two characters right now, they might be good for us like to look at a second rerun or so, rather than like, you know, if you're interested in the characters, of course pull for them, but it wouldn't hurt to be patient and to skip this banner, just because we just don't have enough information about the next characters coming out that's public, at least, so it's hard to make a recommendation on them, right? Because they're so easily influenced by additional characters to the game, Nilo in particular.
Yeah, like there's a lot of gameplay questions we also have to answer, like Nilo, like which version of her E do you use, and you know, like Cyno, he has a lot of gameplay implications with his mobility and his mechanics.
Oh my god, like, Renicorn with the sub to Azel.
Oh,
Why are you giving the sub to Azel? He didn't do anything.
Oh my god, this
man
not
here.
Was sleeping, and then he gets a
you
sub
reward him
to
for
our stream.
you reward.
Oh my
this
god.
is oh no, this is classical conditioning right here. It's like now he's never gonna come on.
Yeah,
man,
I have also seen some people talk about cutting his burst off early instead of letting the whole duration ride. So that's also another thing.
Yeah, right now the duration is extremely long, and outside of like Aggravate, there's not too many buffs that last that long, right? So any character that comes out with longer buff durations, he can leverage a bit better. But yeah, I mean, overall, you know, I know people talk about Raiden versus Cyno a lot, and you know, at the end of the day, I think Raiden is probably a better choice for a lot of people, unless you're specifically looking to play like a Beidou team with an Electro main DPS, or like one field character would be the better phrase.
Yeah, that's just based on known information, so but that's not really a fair comparison. Like Azel said in chat, it's not really fair to compare the two because they just don't have the same team building implications, and
yeah,
also it's just unfair because we know about Raiden. We don't
right we probably know more about Raiden's best teams than Cyno, because Cyno isn't out yet, whereas Raiden we explored and try to basically squeeze as much as we can out of her in TC. So always like characters on release that have been out for a while are gonna look more favorable than pre-release stuff, assuming if you do pre-release stuff calcs like really well, because it's just there's more time to bake and figure out how to min-max things.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see where he lands. But
Mhm.
it's going to be very difficult, it looks like.
Yeah,
Kind of.
basically what Azel said. Well, he didn't say anything because, well, he's not on here. Thought his dreams were better than us. Seriously, I would have loved to talk to you, buddy. I was
Yeah,
looking
Azel will
forward
be
to it.
around hopefully for the next podcast. I won't be able to make the next one, so we're gonna probably have a different guest from WFP come in
A soul for a soul,
to host.
Mhm.
as
Yeah,
it should be.
I was not expecting to jump on the stream this early. I thought it was gonna have time for my chibi, but since I got it
Yeah,
out
I
of the
just
way-
kidnapped Mono to replace Azel real quick. Thank you for coming on the stream, by the way, for
it's
such
my
a
pleasure.
short
Yeah.
notice.
Oh,
Thank
yeah.
you for coming in, Clutch. And any more questions, or you think this is a good place to kind of just stop for a bit until the next one?
Yeah, I think we're
Oh.
good now. Unless someone has like a quick question to ask.
Yeah, I got a quick question. Azel, where were you?
Oh dear.
When is the next one? So we do plan on hosting these podcasts generally about a week before the patch comes out. Main reason being is changes are less likely at the very end of the beta cycle. Well, technically it's going to be the beta cycles usually end a week before the patch comes out. So it gives us a bit more of a closer timeline to like what the characters are going to be like live. Of course, they can always be changed on live. That's why it's important to test everything again when a character comes out. Also, it does give us more time to like really develop our thoughts and like calcs and whatnot on the characters. To have it be a week before patch, so we can expect the next one in about like 5 months. I mean, not 5 months, 5 weeks.
And don't worry if you miss us, because we will be posting these on YouTube, so
Yeah.
you can definitely check us out anytime. We'll be here to tell you all the facts.
Mm-hmm. Facts and opinions.
All right, facts and opinions. Okay, so KB, Mono, any last words before we kind of close out?
No, I think we're good.
Yeah, I think we're good. Yeah, join KQM or WFP if you want to follow more of the TC process, of course. The Guoba project, I'll announce whenever that opens again if you guys are interested in contributing to that. I guess I could shill the compendium real quick because Art has been wanting me to show that.
Go for it.
Let me switch scenes to show the browser real quick.
Yeah, so if you want to receive announcements about the Guoba project when they're opening it up again, do follow us on with KQM or WFP. More information.
Yeah. So this is the not the Guoba. This is the KQM compendium, and it's something that has been worked on for a bit. Basically, it's a repository for people to upload their calculations to showcase teams, whatnot. I think they just made a change to it because some things are broken right now. But normally, when you click on it, you can see like damage breakdowns based on the sheets, and you can click on the sheet button to see the calculations for it to verify if you don't trust it or whatnot, right? You can see how it's done. It's pretty extensive, but this gives like a more easily readable format for people who just want to see like pros and cons of the team, like what weapons they run, and notes. There's always rotation notes and even video footage of how to play the team, which is nice. So this is a pretty cool project. If you want to contribute to it, there should be a command in KQM to ask about it. I think it's like ! Like compendium or something like that. But it also has details about the KQM standards, which you can use to jumpstart your calcs. It's to standardize them with everyone else's calcs in the main TC communities. It's a pretty nice project. I encourage any theory crafters that are watching to contribute to this because, you know, it's always nice to have your sheet saved somewhere nice so they don't get lost in the sands of time. And yeah, that's about it. It's on the KQM
Awesome.
main site. You can find it there.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I think we're definitely living in a pretty cool time where we get to collab on these projects, and you know, this And once we kind of get the ball rolling, hopefully we will get more accurate stats, which is definitely something that we're interested in looking to. Anyways, KB, especially Mono, thank you so much for dropping by, hosting this pilot episode. Thank you everybody who's stayed by and sort of walked with us on the beginning of this journey. There's going to be many more, and get ready for some exciting number crunching, maybe a bit of comps, and who knows, maybe a little bit of copium.
And better production quality
today.
And better production quality.
We'll slowly increase the production quality, guys. So
yeah, so long as we're looking for the budget.
Mm-hmm.
So it would be nice if you could go to WFP's Ko-Fi or
Patreon.
Does KQM have one? Yeah, KQM is a Patreon, right?
I believe so.
Yes.
All right, or KQM's Patreon. That would really help us out in some weird way, shape, or form. We'll find those funds when we need them. Anyways, all right, guys. I think that's it for now. I've been DC. Thank you guys so much for watching once again, and to our new subscribers and our Prime as well, a sub as well. Thank you all so much. I hope you look forward to our future episodes.
All right, I'll see you guys later. Bye.